Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm really excited to talk to everyone today about email marketing. And what I think is really exciting for me about email marketing is for many of us on this call, you're starting out your business, or you're classified as a small business, or you're a startup, or you're dreaming about your business. And what's exciting about email marketing from my experiences is email marketing helps you transition from literal zero all the way up to 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. So it helps you no matter where you are, no matter where you are in your business, which will be very exciting to talk about some of those lessons. So let's kind of dive into the 5 things we're going to learn. So the presentation will be probably around 45 minutes or so. We're going to learn 5 things today, more than 3 things. You're going to learn how to optimize your email forms for conversions. So the first step is making sure you get those email leads to your website and product. The second step is, how do you send effective emails? So one of the big questions I get all the time is, what the heck do I even email? What do I include in my email? What do I send in my email? And we're going to talk about that. The third is, how do I know if my email is successful? So email metrics and benchmarks to compare. And I will give you guys real data on what we see internally with our products to get the results that we do. Then the fourth is those automatic emails. So those drip funnels, those automations, those sequences that you all have heard of in some capacity that work when you're sleeping. So that get results when you're sleeping, so you don't even have to think about it. And then the fifth is how to keep your list clean. So as time goes on, you're continuing to do the best email marketing practices. So altogether, we have this cyclical process that I'm going to talk about in the meeting. And it's all part of this funnel. So we start with the optimizing of email forms. And the first thing is, I just want to give you guys a little background of who I am, so you know that I'm not just like a faker on this meeting telling you stuff that isn't real. So what's really important to me is when I talk about things, I actually do them myself. So I was an early employee at this company that grew pretty quickly called Student Loan Hero. I was an email marketer for Sumo, which has millions of subscribers. And today I am general manager for a company called AppSumo Originals, which has the products SendFox as well as KingSumo, and it's part of AppSumo and Sumo Group. Okay, so just a little intro about me. Now, before we get going, we do have a big question we have to answer. And I'm guessing at least one person on this call has this question. Is email marketing dead? We hear this all the time in the news. It's like, oh, TikTok's a new thing. Instagram's a new thing. Email's going by the wayside. No one does email marketing anymore. But we have to be careful what we read and what is actually true. So it is true that email marketing has changed. So in the old days, before we had all these spam filtration systems and a lot of these engagement filters, you could send to old subscribers without issue. You could send the same email to every type of user. You could send without authentication. You could send these subject lines that aren't checked or that don't matter. And you could focus just on open and click rates. But nowadays, all those things are reversed. There's more complexity to email marketing than there was before. There's more things we need to be careful of. There's more we need to be mindful of. So email marketing is not dead, and I'm going to show you on the next slide why that is so using real data, but it has changed, and we need to be mindful of how it's changed. So if you do email marketing right, you will still get great results. And here are some of those results. So what I love about email marketing is it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? It's a Swiss Army knife, so we can have it fit our type of business. So in this upper left quadrant right here, we can generate free users. And this is email that we've done in the past, that I've done in the past, that has generated free users. It can generate app signups in this bottom left. It can generate web sessions and revenue in the right-hand side. So email marketing is not dead, and it's adaptable. It can be both those things, right? So it can adapt to the type of business we have as a startup, as a growing company, as a 7-figure company, as a company whose goal this year is to get more conversions, as a company whose goal next year is to get more web sessions. We can do a lot of different things with email marketing. So here are 5 strategies that work in today's world that we think about for email marketing. So step 1, like we said, thinking about this funnel is first we have to optimize email forms. So a lot of people, and I think this is so critical in business, a lot of people want to get to the third or fourth step of a process before they lay the foundation. And if we think about building a house, if we don't build that good concrete foundation first, then it all collapses. Doesn't matter how pretty it looks. If we don't build a quality foundation, it doesn't work. And a saying to think about that is a saying that one of the US presidents, Abraham Lincoln, said years and years ago. He said, if I have 7 hours to chop down a tree, 6 of those hours I'm going to spend sharpening my axe. And that's how I think about marketing. And that's how I think especially about email marketing. A lot of preparation that goes into it. So the first thing we want to do is optimize those email forms. Because if we're thinking about writing emails, we really want to make sure that we're actually getting email subscribers. If we spend 14 hours writing an email that only 2 people see, it doesn't matter unless we get the people in the door first. So here's a 1-2 punch to optimize your forms faster and easier than before. So here's a trick. And this is such a simple trick. The first thing is to utilize Google Analytics to define your pop-up time. So there are people that set pop-up times to be 2 seconds. There are people that set pop-up times to be 45 minutes, right? What we're actually looking for is what is this average time on page, and how do we make sure that it's less than the average time on page? Because we want to make sure that the pop-up is actually displaying for the majority of people on our website, and we don't want to mistime that. And then also using Google Analytics, we want to see what are our most popular websites on the page and make sure that we're hyper-targeting, most popular pages on the website, and that we're hyper-targeting the pop-ups for those pages. So you can see in this example, just looking at Google Analytics for a blog that I've worked with in the past, these are very popular pages. So when we think about our pop-up strategy, when we think about getting more leads, we want to make sure that A, we're getting in front of the most amount of people, which is using Google Analytics to understand the average time on page. And we're also getting in front of the people who are visiting the most pages, which is us understanding what pages are most popular. So if we want to get all these leads, we have to be in the right places with our pop-ups and our forms. And once we establish kind of that baseline of where we want to put our forms and how we want to put our forms, the question is, what do our forms look like? We don't need to really make this super complicated. So you look at something like this pop-up that was generated using sumo.com, but Opt-in Master as well as Thrive Leads are alternatives. There are a million out there. Privy is another one. You could be platform agnostic and just go with whatever one's cheaper. We look at a simple design and copy that resonates with users. So thinking about, if we go back a page, thinking about these pages, what do people on these pages want? What do they want to see? And for this example right here, this was displayed on a page that talked about how to collect email addresses. So we had a pop-up that was very pertinent to the content on the page. And it was created with just a simple screenshot here at the top, some copy right here, some copy right here, and then an email opt-in box. So we look at this opt-in rate, and this is a 50% opt-in rate, really, really high. So we take a little bit more time to just more thoughtfully plan out our pop-up strategy by identifying the pages that could work the best and coming up with a pop-up that's pertinent to those types of pages. But we see a result that's roughly 10x higher than a typical opt-in rate. So we think about this a lot in business, right? Where we put in a little more effort and we get disproportionate results. We put in maybe 2x the effort as a normal person, but we get 10x the results. And that's what we're seeing right here. So then we need to figure out, okay, we have this pop-up launched. How does it fit within the framework of a good or bad pop-up? So are my opt-in rates good? And these are real numbers and real metrics. So feel free to screenshot this or write this down, because what we want to make sure when we're creating our pop-ups is, are my pop-ups in line with what they should be? So the average pop-up rate we see is about 2.9%. The top 50% are around 1.8, and then the top 10% are around 6.5%. So knowing the benchmarks, knowing the baselines for us to aim for helps us understand, Should we optimize our pop-up more? Are we well below average, meaning that we need to fix it and find some solution? Or are we well above average, meaning that we don't need to focus on that and we can move on to other marketing focuses? So when we think about our work week, we all have 40 hours in a work week. We all need to make decisions on what is the most important thing to focus on at any given time. And knowing the benchmarks for our emails means that we could say, hey, this is good or this is bad. I need to focus more time on this, or I need to focus more time on something else because this is just totally fine as it is. But the key is really don't worry about creating amazing opt-in rates at first. So you might see some of these numbers, you might see some of these numbers and you might say, oh man, 6.5, that's crazy. I'm not going to get there. And that's okay. Because at first we want to just launch. So we think about running a marathon. Before we can run a marathon, we need to learn to walk. And then we need to learn to jog 2 miles. And then we need to learn to jog 4 miles. And then we need to learn to jog more. And then we need to learn to run faster and increase our pace. So we're not going to be amazing overnight. We're not going to be amazing overnight. And what gets in the way of launching is often that pursuit of perfection. So it's good to understand the baseline and the metrics so we know how to improve and we know the targets to aim for. But we also want to set realistic expectations that we're not usually going to just launch a magnificent pop-up on the first try. So that's where we figure out the testing strategy. So it's launching a pop-up, it's adding a variant in split testing, it's running for a week, it's picking a winner. And this is a really quick process. And sometimes we hear through marketing that you have to test for statistical significance and you have to run it for 4 weeks and you have to do very specific testing methodology. If we're a new business, like many of you are, we can be a little more flowing with the process. We can go a little bit easier. We can do things a little bit differently because we're really just trying to iterate and find success as fast as we can. So running for a week is totally fine, and then picking a winner and then continuing to iterate to the point that we feel comfortable as part of those metrics we identified. Now, speaking of testing, we get to step 2 now. So we have the email forms established. And again, they're not going to be perfect right away, but we have the framework of what it looks like to say, these are the places I want to put my email forms. And this is what a good email form looks like. So once we have that established, we can start to think about, okay, I have that foundation laid. And even if I'm trying to improve the foundation, the next step is still testing my emails. Here is one of the most important things for this presentation. One of the things I get asked about all the time. It's how to write email copy. How to write email copy. And it amazes me. It blows my mind how bad most email copy is. It's just so bad. Now, when we think about email copy, and when we think about marketing copy in general, there are 3 real core tenets. The first thing I always encourage people to think about is write like you're talking to a friend. So there's this thing called the bar talk technique, which means when I'm at a bar with my friend, and think about this for all of you, or when I'm casually hanging out with my friend, maybe nowadays in light of COVID, when I'm having like a Zoom conversation with a friend, we're just talking casually. Like I'm talking to you guys right now. We're not using very fancy wording and sophisticated language and terminology. But for some reason, probably because of our schooling growing up, we're used to writing things that sound very professional. And unfortunately, that harms our copywriting ability when we're trying to build authenticity and connection with our audience. So make sure we're thinking more casual language, easier to understand language, simpler language. And the second rule is we want to look at those engagement rates. So a lot of times I get asked, what is a good open rate and click rate? And we'll talk about some of those numbers in a little bit. But we also vary from business to business. So when we think about growing our businesses, what we're always looking at are we getting incrementally better? Are we looking at our baselines? Are we looking at what we're getting right now? And are we thinking about how we can optimize the metric that matters? So maybe your overarching business goal is you want more clicks to your website. So then you're looking at this engagement metric of click rate and you're testing accordingly every week, every couple weeks, every month to try to optimize this. So really strategic testing, a process of testing will help you get to the answer you want. One of the things I think of in my own business and I think of in my own life is I'm not the smartest business owner out there. I'm not the most talented business owner out there. But what I think separates me and I think separates a lot of people is we understand that we can keep testing and keep developing hypotheses to get to where we want to go. And that is absolutely true of email marketing. And then the third core tenet of email marketing is accept the fact that you're going to fail. We talked about this with the forums a few minutes ago a little bit. We're all going to fail as long as we're adapting and learning and we have a process in place that allows us to fail and allows us to get better. It's going to be fine. So we think about the exact type of content to write my subscribers, to write your subscribers, to write our subscribers. Here are a few ideas to start with. So we're like, okay, great. We have this idea that we need to write in more common language, that we need to simplify the wording we're using. But what do we actually write about? What do we even talk about? There are three things we can talk about. I'm going to show practical examples of all three of these in a minute, so you'll see what I'm talking about. But we can start with simple blog posts or personal updates. Hey, I'm working on this thing. Hey, I wrote this thing. We can look at most popular blog posts or articles or content pieces or pages of the website we've written already and give more details or insights about that topic. And that's a great strategy because if it's a popular article or blog post or page on our website, then people are telling us, hey, I like this, and they're probably receptive to hearing more about it. So we want to talk to them about those other options. And then if you're still not sure, you can send a survey. And the Ask methodology is a great methodology to use. This is from a book that you can find online. People love talking about themselves. So maybe the question is, how are you today? Maybe it's a Google form that asks them a bit more so you can understand their business and their types of content they want to learn. So you can understand their customer mindset a little more. So here's a great example of one of the things I just talked about. So this is back from 2018, but I want to pull this because this is a great example. And it's very simply a blog post. It's a blog post to something we wrote on the Sumo blog. So you'll notice that the wording we used is not very complex. The email is not very long. It's really simply focused on casual language and getting people to a blog post and to clicking a blog post. All right, and here are some of the identifications that show you the parts of this email. So the hook, why should I read this email? Okay, not all the advice out there is good, so it's giving me a contrarian opinion. Can I relate to this email? Is it relatable for me as a reader? What am I actually going to learn? Where the link is high above the fold so that a reader sees it right away when they're scrolling on their mobile device without scrolling too far. And then more incentive to click. I'll learn these things. I'll learn these three key factors. So the lesson here is you can really email blog posts and content pieces and do very successfully. So let's check out this example. I think this is a really interesting example. So this is a prime example of the CEO of our company sending an email that seemingly has no purpose, right? Seemingly has no purpose. But what we're actually doing, if you look a little deeper, is we're sending an email to more regularly engage with our customer base, to more regularly engage with our audience so that they know we're still actively sending emails, to regularly build that habit. And there's no links in here. There's no real action for them to take, but it is a fun email. And it helps us continue to build that reputation, that authority, that connection with the reader. And the results are very strong with a 30% open rate and a very low unsubscribe rate. So it wasn't as annoying as we potentially had feared. And we look at what makes this email fun. So why should I read this? It's a fun email. What does he mean? Nothing. This is confusing. I want to understand. So we give a lot of bullet point examples. What's the point of this email? You don't need more. That's really what it comes down to. So there is a lesson among all this copy. And then what should I do? Have a great day. So we're empowering them, we're encouraging them, we're connecting with them. And the large takeaway from this is just have some fun. You can have some fun with your emails. A lot of times with business, we think so seriously. I need to always do this thing. I need to focus on the metrics. I need to make sure my spreadsheet is updated. It can become a bit robotic. So we want to remember we can have some fun. Business is meant to have fun. We create businesses because we want to give back to the world and do something bigger and better and do it in the way we want to do it. And that includes email. That includes the emails we send. This is a third example. And I really like this example because maybe you don't have a blog post. Maybe you don't have a blog post that you wrote. Maybe you also don't have a funny story that you want to tell. But here's what we usually have. We usually have an interesting piece of content that we as business owners have found interesting recently. And this is the example for this website that helps with muscle growth, where they were like, listen, we don't have anything new for you this week. But what they did have was they had third-party links. They had external links, things that they've enjoyed. And they took those links and they made it into an email. So they found this study that they read and they emailed it out to their subscribers. So the angle here is being a trusted advisor to your subscribers. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to always have a piece of content, but you're likely reading something. Like you as business owners are likely reading something. So can you share that with your audience? And can you help them understand how you're an expert and what you have learned from this article that they would be interested in learning as well? So those are the 3 emails that we can send. And there are countless others, but those are 3 real ones that we have practically sent in the past. So you've sent an email. Let's talk about what happens after you've sent an email. Maybe it was one of those emails, maybe it was something different, but what happens next? So the next thing we talk about as we continue down that funnel, as we continue post email forms, post sending their first email, what do the results look like? Now, here's what it comes down to. Everyone wants to know about email stats, so I'm just going to give them to you. I'm just going to tell you exactly what's good and what's bad. So there are 2 metrics that matter, 2 key metrics. You have open rate and you have click rate. Here are the open and click rates from Sumo Group emails. And feel free to screenshot this as well so you can use it as a baseline. The open rate and the click rate really does depend on the send volume of your audience. So for example, when we were under 5,000 subscribers for one of our products, we saw a 35% open rate. And I think that's a great target to aim for. When you get to around 10,000 subscribers, you see a slightly lower open rate. When you get to 50,000, you see a lower. When you see a 200,000 email list, you get to see even lower. So it changes depending on the size of the list. And you'll notice that the click rates are kind of across the board. And the click rate is a little different, let's say. And the reason for that is because maybe some emails emphasize clicking a little more. Maybe other emails like that OK Dork example you saw where there was like, hey, don't take any action, have no link, and its purpose is just engagement. So the click rate is really dependent upon what you want the action to be, if you want to be an action. Okay. So the bottom line for open rates, big versus small list, if you have under 100,000 subscribers, you want to have a 20% open rate or higher. If you have over 100,000 subscribers, you want to have a 10 to 20% open rate, something in that range. So as we think about the baselines for many small businesses starting out, we want to be at least over 20. If we're not over 20, then that's a flag for us to understand, hey, something might be wrong. It might be a misconfiguration with my email sending server, so a technical issue. It might be I'm sending to bad subscribers. It might be that my open subject line is not very good. There are a few different situations it could be, but it does give us an indication of, okay, let's improve this. Let's figure out what this is. Let's develop a hypothesis and see if it is true or not true. Now on the inverse, so we talk about open and click rate, and that's all people talk about most of the time. But we want to remember that there are some inverse metrics that we want to be wary of, that we want to be mindful of. And those are spam and unsubscribe rates. So when we think about the balancing of an email act, right? The balancing of an email marketing strategy, we have an open rate and a click rate target, but we also want to keep the spam rate lower than 0.02 per email. So we want to keep it lower than 0.02. And then on the unsubscribe, we want to keep it lower than a factor about 10x higher than the spam rate, which is lower than 0.2. So those ranges will help make sure that our email is deliverable, that Google, as well as Yahoo, as well as all these other inbox providers see our email as a quality email and deliver it to the inbox instead of the spam folder. And there are 3 tools that help us identify some of these spam and unsubscribe potential issues, right? So it's easy for me to say, hey, just make sure this doesn't happen. But if we don't have testing methodology, then we're not going to be able to do it. So if you Google around, there's Send Check It, email subject line tester, which helps grade your subject line, give it a score, so that you know if you have some spam words or some trap words or some potential issue-inducing words. There's also mailtester.com, which is free. Both these first 2 are free. And mailtester.com helps grade your emails so that you understand throughout the body of the email, not just the subject line like Send Check It, but through the body of your email, are there any potential issues? Is there anything you're forgetting or you're noticing that could cause a deliverability concern? And then the last one is for those of you that are really serious about email marketing and that your primary marketing channel is email marketing, these 2 options are paid and they're also helpful if you have the budget for it. And again, email marketing is an important channel for you. Litmus or Email on Acid, they cost money, but they give more complete reports. You don't need them necessarily, especially when you're starting out and you're just trying to get to the base of this foundation. But if you're very serious about them, they can help. So now that we know email marketing, now that we've talked a little bit about it at a high level, we've talked about forms, we've talked about what types of emails to write, we've talked about the results, we're going to talk about automation. And automation comes next because it allows us to send emails, to automatically send emails as we sleep, to let them just kind of go as they go. So drip campaign can be an email series after sign up, a content upgrade after a purchase, whatever we want it to be. They're also called campaigns in some email solutions, ongoing emails and other email solutions. There's a lot of different words for them, but they're really automatic emails. And you can see a few of them down below. So this example is an e-commerce store. After someone redeems a coupon, they get an email with that coupon code reminding them to use it. You can see some of our Sumo sequences right here. So maybe someone uninstalled a product and we want feedback. Maybe someone bought and we want to keep them from churning. Maybe someone gave us an email lead, they signed up and we want to get them to sign up for the product. So there are a lot of different paths you can go down. And again, for many of us, it's just focusing on the most simple solution. Most simple solution. So when you see some of these options, when we think about some of these options, when we read about email marketing online, we're often reading these complex statements that's like, you have to segment everyone, you have to do this advanced complexity. And I've seen companies get to the 7-8 figure range without any segmentation, without anything. So it's not always necessary. So here's a very simple formula for winning drip that we can all implement that is not complex. This is it. It's a 3-part sequence. And again, think how different this is compared to what we read online. So the first email, hello and gather feedback. Hi, welcome to my product. What's the #1 thing I can help you? Reply to this email and let me know. #2 email. Hey, I saw you signed up. I just want to send over some of my best pieces of content. Here's my recent favorite blog post. Here's my recent favorite podcast I was on. Here's my favorite guest post I've done. Thanks so much. And then email #3, after they've been warmed up and introduced to you, after they've started to form a connection because they've replied to you in that first email, after they've seen what you're about because they've checked out some of your content in that second email, or they've learned a little more about you on guest posts or a podcast post or a podcast guest series, whatever it is. The third email is then talking about the problem you solve and potentially getting a selling opportunity going. So here's a great example. Here's a great example. And it takes the framework we've talked about. So the first email, Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Here are 3 links. So this is actually more like the second email we alluded to in the past screen, but you can see that we do have some flexibility. The second email, here are my 3 favorite episodes of my podcast that I did. Again, notice how simple the copy is, how short the copy is. And then email number 3 is the equivalent of a sell email. And keep in mind, what's interesting about this example is you don't need to sell a product. Maybe at this phase of your business, you're more interested, like this sell email, on getting someone to apply for a job because you're looking for a co-founder, or you're looking for your first full-time employee or your first contractor. We have flexibility on how this sequence is handled. The thing to take away is, what is the flow of a user? What is the flow of a reader? Am I walking them through my content correctly? Am I opening up to them correctly? Am I talking to them correctly? And we look at the stats for some of these emails, and we go back to what we mentioned about good stats. So we see above 20% open rate for all of these, above a solid CTR for all of these. And maybe there is opportunity to improve these. There almost definitely is always opportunity to improve. But we set the baseline and we say, hey, this is good enough for what we're trying to do right now. Now, once you get going, let's say you create that simple 3-sequence automation, you can start with some basic segmentation. I'm going to show you what that looks like at a high level. So with one of those emails, let's say someone clicked a YouTube link or a podcast link in that first email. So going back to this, someone clicked one of these links or someone clicked one of these links, and we really want them to take action. You can set up a sequence so that they click one of those links and then they're asked to leave a review in your podcast platform, in iTunes or Libsyn or whatever podcast platform you want reviews in. And the open rate and the click rate is very high for those. So we don't need to build this complex segmentation strategy, but we always want to think about what is our goal with the business and how can we help emphasize people to take action towards that goal. And in this case, let's say the goal was to drive more people to leave an iTunes review or to grow my podcast more generally. Then I want to do some basic segmentation that helps push people to click from a link to take that action required. So we have all this kind of email process stuff going on, right? So we're creating this strategy and this foundation. And again, this doesn't happen overnight. This happens over days and weeks and months that we build this entire process. But this is more of the process so you can see the change. So you can see that through line that goes between the ideas that we have. So the last thing we want to make sure we do is we're building this consistent, habitual cleaning process. So we're taking good care of our emails and our strategy. And one of the tips I have, actually 3 specific tips, but one larger high-level tip, is from a Gmail anti-spam team member. So someone who decides is part of that team that decides whether emails get into the inbox or goes to the spam folder for the Gmail team. And this is what he said. This is what we took away from our conversation with this person. Focusing on engagement is really valuable, really valuable. So we look back to those email examples. We think back to those email examples. And we want to make sure we're either generating clicks or replies or time spent in the email. The best analogy I can draw is Gmail's inboxing strategy. Their email spam strategy is very similar to how they think about SEO nowadays. So many of you are familiar with SEO. If I'm more highly ranked on Google search engine, it's because I have quality content that people are clicking and staying for a long time and doing all these things. And we can draw parallels when we think of that strategy along with our email marketing strategy. Unsubscribes aren't always bad. That's another one to think about. So a lot of people try to obscure and hide that unsubscribe link or make it difficult to unsubscribe. And what actually happens is that backfires in our face, because think about it for many of us. If I don't see an easy way to unsubscribe, I'm just going to mark the email as spam. And that leads to our third point, that spam is the worst thing for emails. So we want to make sure that we're not buying lists that we're not doing sketchy things to get lists from people who don't want our emails. Because if we see a large percentage of spam, that indicates to Gmail that they do not want them. Whereas unsubscribe is often a softer issue where it's like maybe they just don't want them anymore. But we want to be careful to avoid the aggressive action of people marking as spam. Okay, and what's important is we think back to this, right? We don't want to just realize this too late, too far after the fact. We also want to take some preventative action. We want to take some pre-steps to make it good. So my recommendation for thinking about email marketing as time goes on, and again, we don't have to figure out all of this right away. This is looking at kind of the complete end-to-end, is we want to make sure that we're sending to active subscribers. Active subscribers. And many of you may have heard about this recently, where it's good to send to active subscribers. Here's how to do it within MailChimp, for example. Every tool is different, but what we're basically looking for is we're basically trying to only send to people who have either joined our email list or opened or clicked within some time range from 3 to 6 months. 3 to 6 months. Anyone who is older than that, who hasn't opened or clicked in the last 3 months or 6 months and has joined more than 3 or 6 months ago is what we consider inactive. And there are two things you can do for inactives. One is you can remove them completely, which for many of us is great to save money because then we don't have to pay for those subscribers. My recommendation is always export anyone you remove just in case. And you could also export them and send a yearly re-engagement. So a lot of e-commerce companies, for example, do this for Black Friday or do it for a special sales day where they'll make sure they're only sending to actives for most of the year, but then for Black Friday, they'll do a special re-engagement. And that's okay. That's allowed to do because what that allows us to do is make sure that we're in Gmail and Google's good graces. So we're not sending to inactive subscribers, AKA subscribers who don't want it all the time. Most of the time we're sending to great subscribers, but maybe once or twice a year, we're sending to inactive subscribers. Okay, so we made it to the end of this presentation. We made it to the end. And at a high level, I just want to recount because we always want to think of kind of the funnel and the high level of why we're talking about what we're talking about. And it helps us understand more of the process. So the very first thing we're doing is we're optimizing those email forms. We're making sure we're putting them on the right places. We're making sure we're featuring the right types of content. We want to test our emails. So we want to make sure that we're writing emails in the best way as is best for our business. We're using simple terminology. We're not writing it like we're writing a university paper. We want to measure results. So we want to say, hey, we're doing these things. How are they standing up to baselines, industry averages, so we understand whether we need to go this way or that way? And then we're automating. So once we have this process defined, the success in front of us, once we've understood a little bit more, we can start to think about what does a welcome sequence look like? What does an onboarding sequence look like? What does a new customer sequence look like? But we're always making sure to keep in mind what we said from this test your emails, that our emails are short and they have a purpose and they have a point, a direction, a goal behind them. And then the very last thing rather, to make sure our emails are deliverable and continue to go to the inbox as it becomes more and more of an important marketing channel for us, we want to make sure to take appropriate action. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things to ensure deliverability by following best practices and doing what is correct. Okay, so I'll take a stop there. I know there's a lot to digest. I know there's a lot to think about, but let's take a moment to answer any questions or talk about any specifics that you guys want to talk about on this late evening day over there. Any questions so far?
Guys, anyone who wants to ask questions, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Yeah, and whether it's going back to a slide or going into a specific question, I'm happy to answer if you guys have anything.
You can even, since I don't see microphone on for all of you, you can even type in a chat, so I will ask.
So this is not a specific question, but this was a very nice presentation, and I would love to see some kind of training or examples, and I don't know what is the next step in this process, in this so-called project, but we all need more practice examples and training.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that, Goran. And Vlad probably knows more about this than I am, but as far as the process, but we are talking about, I'm happy to give some kind of 1-hour workshops individually to a few of you to talk through your email marketing process. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to Vlad, or Vlad will reach out to you or something about that. But the next step is I want to make sure I can help a few of you by doing some workshops to really dive deeply into your specific email marketing process or your specific marketing process in general, and where email marketing could fit in, or how to think more strategically about marketing in general.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I will contact you all through email. And when you receive the link with the whole presentation and everything, you can easily just get back to me and we can discuss what kind of support you need further. And then we will see how to organize everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Vlad.
Great.
Sounds great. First come, first
Vladimir,
serve.
can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Okay, thank you, David, for this presentation.
Sure.
I'm amazed because I'm a psychologist and I don't know anything about marketing at first. And of course, email marketing, and those numbers are very scary to me, honestly. I think I have an idea about, I'm from Bosnia, a
Cool.
town called Travnik. It's very small town. So
Nice.
I have an idea about opening my small business about psychology support for everyone. So, but I have one huge problem. You
Yes.
know, in our country, going to psychologist is very problematic thing to talk about. So it's very, how could I say, stigmatic and not okay if someone sees you go to psychologist or psychiatrist. And I want to step up my marketing by going about coaching and life coaching.
Awesome.
So people could understand that I want to help them, not to cure them. And do you think that email marketing can help me promote that kind of thing? So I just need a very, very huge support for marketing because
Yeah.
it's very touchy subject, if you know what I mean. And I don't know that I want my clients to come, but I know it will be so selective, and they are shy and full of some thoughts about psychologists. And thank you.
It's a great question, a really interesting question, because here's the truth about business. And I think many of you know this kind of intuitively. What works for one business might not work for another business. And we even see this with my sister companies, where email marketing is a primary marketing channel of one company. Paid ads is a primary marketing channel of another company. What we always want to make sure to do, however, is think through marketing strategically. So to your question, Zarina, it's like, could email marketing work for you? I think email marketing is one of the most adaptable marketing channels out there. So I think it could, but what I would encourage you to do is think about two things. So the first thing I would think about is, what is a goal for me, let's say going into 2021. Now that we're at the end of the year, I think this is a really great time to think about it. And maybe as a startup, as a new company, we want to even think more short term than that. So we want to say, what is our goal in Q1 or in the first month in January? And we want to specifically think of something that is achievable. So maybe your goal is, I want to get 10 psychiatrists on a conversation with me, or I want to get 10 psychiatrists on my email list, or something along those lines. Now, the reason why we're kind of talking about this from a different angle, and I'm answering your question in kind of a roundabout way, is because once we understand that high level goal, then we can start to identify the marketing channels. So then everything becomes a math equation. So if my goal is, let's say, 10 customers, then I could say, okay, I think I can do email marketing and get 3 customers. But that leaves 7 customers for me to figure out. So what other marketing channels and opportunities are there? So one of the first things I always encourage people to do is, once they establish that goal, that high level goal, then it's us listing as many marketing channels as we think of and writing down the potential number of customers that we think we can get from that channel. And to understand that number, maybe we're just Googling around and we're just Googling for stuff like normal conversion rates for email marketing, normal conversion rates for ads, normal conversion rates for blog posting. So when we think about it like that, it becomes less challenging for us to say subjectively, this will work or this will not work, or for us to get stressed over something. And it becomes just an objective math equation, because we say, I want 75 customers or 50 customers or 10 people to talk to. What are the factors that go into that? Maybe email marketing is a factor. Maybe paid ads is a factor. Maybe organic is a factor. Maybe none of those are factors. But once we list out the marketing channels, it allows us to more strategically say, okay, none of these were factors. What happens if I keep going down this list and keep trying?
Okay,
and at a
thank you
high
so
level,
much.
yeah, you're
Thank you
welcome. At
so
a high
much.
level, that's how I would approach it. So I would think about, how can we be strategic and how can we think through the goal, because everything comes from that initial goal. If we don't have a clear goal, if we don't have a clear direction, it's kind of like getting in a car without an end destination in mind. We're just driving and we're like, I don't know where I'm going. But if we have an end destination, we know the direction we're going and we can more clearly put it. So I hope that helps, Irina.
I thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a question from Zoran. He's typing that, what are your recommendations for email campaign software, MailChimp or some other, especially for post-campaign analysis?
So I missed part of that. It kind of broke up for a second for me, Vlad.
Yeah,
I think my internet kind of sucks.
What are your recommendations for email campaign software? Is it MailChimp or some other, especially from post-campaign analysis?
Yes. Cool. Yeah, thanks for repeating that. Okay, so here is my opinion on technology and the software to use. Don't worry about it too much. Don't worry about it too much. Whether it's MailChimp, whether it's ConvertKit, whether it's Aweber, whether it's our solution SendFox, if you're a content creator, whether it's MailerLite, they all basically do the same thing. They all basically do the same thing. So my encouragement is to look at whatever one at a high level you think accomplishes what you want, and then also at a high level is affordable for the price that you are willing to pay. Maybe that's just a free plan for now, and they all have free plans so you could test it out. Any of those are fully capable of giving you the information that you're looking for, so you could find out the information you want. But again, kind of like what I was telling Zarina, what we want to care about more is we want to care about this process and the strategic element of identifying the goals and making sure that we have a clear outline of what we want to happen. And the technology is easy to obsess over, but we don't have to obsess over it as much. We can always change it down the line. I've changed email marketing software tons of times, even for 7, 8-figure companies. There was a company I helped last year that changed their email marketing 3 times in a year, their platform. And that was totally doable. So it isn't the end of the world if you ever have to change. It's a great problem to have if you have to change because you've reached the limits of email marketing software. But in order to reach the limits of the software we're using, we have to be successful. So we have to get there first.
Okay, more questions?
I think I have a question. Just let me start the video again. Okay, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Well, half year ago, I started my own business, and it's something market, although it's very common in America. So I'm starting a legal support for firms that don't have in-house lawyer. So if you have a small firm, small, middle, or micro firm, all legal aid legal topics I cover, and I can do it for you. So almost a month ago, I was invited by Vladimir, and we had this. I was covering legal topics on the issues for freelancers, and almost 1,000 people were the ones who were watching that blog that we were a webinar that we launched. And so I got the list of all the people that were watching this video, this webinar. And my question is, I'm looking at this list of potential clients, and I want to make a first step. And of course, I know about MailChimp and all these things, but I know how everything now is specific, and I want to do the best thing to just to start with this process of asking them questions and sending them content. And I have everything, but I'm kind of, I don't want to make mistakes with 1,000 people. So it's kind of, you know the issues. So I would really like to work one-on-one with you just on this process of starting, and I would really take any recommendations that you have in this process, because this is really like starting to build a community.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great. And I'll just answer that kind of at a high level, how I would strategically think through that. So I think you brought up a great point, and that is when we have 1,000 people, we don't want to miss our opportunity. So one of the things I think about with email marketing and marketing in general is how can we lessen the potential issues that happen? So maybe for you, Ida, it's starting with a group of 10 people and emailing those 10 people using an outreach tool like Lemlist or something that you have to use, because there might be some GDPR concerns if you just add them to MailChimp right away. Check your local laws. But the concept being is if I email 10 people and then I measure their responses. So going back to what we talked about a little bit with measuring stats, let's say no one replies to me. Then I just tried 10 people, and that's okay. So then for my next group of 10 people, I'm thinking through the process and I'm saying, why do I think these people didn't respond to me? Maybe my subject line wasn't good enough. Maybe my copy was too long. Maybe I didn't speak to their problem in the email. Maybe I tried to sell them too much and it should have just been a foot in the door, meaning I should just say, hi, my name is Ida. I just want to see if you're interested in potentially exploring more, yes or no. Maybe that's a strategy. So the opportunity to take that group of 1,000 and to think about how can I break it down into smaller chunks is how I would think through that. So then you're not necessarily missing the mark with all 1,000 and saying, I have to get this to be perfect, which is an issue we all run into when we think of perfection. We're looking at, okay, I messed up with 10, no big deal. Let me just go back and change the subject line a little bit. Okay, I got 10 more emails sent and one person responded. Great, I'm making a little bit of progress. Let me go to the next group of 10. Or you can break it up with 20 people or 30 people, whatever it is, but that'll help you, or 100 people, that'll help you think through it with lessening the burden to be perfect, because we just want to think through it more strategically. And we could talk in more detail, but that's how I would think through it. And hopefully that's helpful to other people on the call as well.
Thanks for answer. Yes, I know that strategies. I'm always the type of trying, just making. Of course, I don't know everything, so I test and test and test. But when I got this 1,000, I'm like, oh no, testing. You have to be so here. And I was like, hold your horses. So this is why I'm here, actually.
Cool. Yeah, congrats on the 1,000. Very exciting.
Thanks. Hope I don't mess up.
You'll be fine. Just remember, because we mess up stuff all the time. So always keep in mind, hey, if I mess up, what's the worst that can happen? And how can I try to lessen the issue if this is like a breaking issue? So when I think about marketing, I'm like, hey, I'm probably going to mess up a lot of stuff, but I have this strategic process so that I know if I mess this up, I can just move on to this. And that's the key to keep in mind.
Yeah.
If we all knew everything, we'd all have 10-figure businesses, but we're all trying to figure it out.
Okay, more questions?
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Sure.
If
No
that's
worries.
okay.
Yeah.
So when Aida spoke, I just remembered, I have one question. So if I have my firm, like psychology advisor or something like that, is it better for me to send email to another huge firm, like, I don't know, when we have 100 employees, so I can offer my psychology advices and my, I don't know, everything that I can give them? Or do I, to the manager, one mail, or to everyone who is the employee?
Good question. So there are two thoughts I have on that. One is, like we kind of alluded to, it really depends on the business, and every business is different. The way I would approach that kind of decision-making process is, what is my goal? Again, so we talked about that. So knowing the goal helps us establish what do we want the outcome to be. And then once we have that, the question becomes, who do I think is the most likely decision maker to help me towards that goal? So there are kind of three segments of people you alluded to. I would test with the decision maker. And then kind of like we were talking about with Ida, it's like, okay, this isn't necessarily going to work the first time. And that's so important to remember in marketing, that our first swing, our first attempt often doesn't work. But what separates people that do create successful businesses or that create successful marketing strategies, oftentimes, not always, there are a lot of factors, but oftentimes, is that we are prepared, they are prepared, you are prepared for that failure to happen. And we know the next step. So to your point, Serena, it's like, okay, maybe I reach out to this first segment of people, and the first segment of people don't respond. What's my backup plan? And when we think through those backup plans and we think through the process and the flow that, again, relates to high level goal, it makes any decision like that easier. So maybe you contact that first group and they're like, we're not interested, or they're just not responding. So then you look and you say, okay, let me just change my copy around a little bit and try to go after the second group. And then you get a few more responses. And then you learn how to optimize from there. So there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. And this is true of all marketing. There's not like a you should do this or you should do that. Despite what online blogs say, there's not like the one trick to success. Otherwise, again, we'd all have 9-figure businesses because we do that one thing. What we do see as a consistent factor of success is I have a direction I'm moving. I have clarity around that direction, and I have a process where I can test so that even if I fail, I know to move on to the next step. And I know that I can continue trying, and I always have kind of stuff in my back pocket that I can do.
Thank you very much.
Maybe,
Sure.
Is there any kind of sort of, you just described one process if you get an email through opt-in or something like that, but is that process in any case different if you are doing the cold emailing, for example? Because the Aida and Zarina asked about actually cold emailing. So is there any kind of difference between processes?
Yeah, I like this question because we talked about in this presentation, like with the assumption of having a blog or assumption of already having traffic. So what happens if we have a brand new business and we don't even have anyone coming to our website yet, which is where every business starts. We all start from zero in some capacity. So a lot of the same principles apply to cold emails. And a lot of the same principles apply to marketing in general, because here's what I'm really trying to figure out as a marketer. When I break down marketing to the highest, easiest level, there are two things that I care about. Who are my customers and where are my customers? That's all marketing is in a nutshell. So when I think about how that applies to cold email, who are the people that could be my customers or my users or my audience? And where are they? So then maybe I am using cold email to go to people on LinkedIn that look like my target market, or to Google around and try to find businesses that are my target market and then reach out to them directly, or through some other methodology. But the nuance I would really double down on with cold emails specific to the content, once we kind of have that idea established of who we want to go after, is even more so than the typical newsletter emails. We want to make sure our cold emails are very short. And thinking about being a reader or a recipient of marketing materials, of getting an email, think about, for everyone on this call, how many cold emails you get a day, and think about how long those emails are, or cold emails a week, whatever time frame you want to use. How can we be different? How can we stand out amongst the noise? So my recommendation for cold emails is to be even shorter and to be even more succinct. I've seen cold emails with 2 or 3 sentences work very well. Hey, my name is so-and-so. I'm just curious to hear, like, are you interested in this? I'm just taking a survey. Yes or no? And then they say yes. Okay, cool. Here's more information. So think about, here's a great analogy for this. Think about the first time we go on a date with someone, like we're at a dinner date. The very first date, we're not asking this person to marry us. That'd be very strange for most of us. And the same thing applies with marketing, where for some reason, cold email marketers are just like, here's a full email of everything. And it'd be like on the first date, if the person was like, here's everything about me and I want to marry you and everything for the rest of our lives. We don't do that. The first date, we're like, hey, let me tell you more about me. Let me find out more about you. And we should think about cold emails the same. Whereas behaviorally, as humans, we want to understand a little bit more before we give away our money. Right? So we're just looking for those short, simple emails with cold emails, even more so than our typical newsletter emails.
Thanks.
Sure. Great question, Vlad.
More questions? Okay, if not, cool. I would like to thank you all for coming, for participating. David, also thank you for being with us today, this morning.
My pleasure. Yes, thank you for having me.
I will send each of you an email with link to this lecture, so you can look it again or find some points that David told us today. So basically, if anyone is interested what we are doing as a project and how David is a part of this, feel free to ask through email, and we will keep in touch in the next period. So thank you once more again, and good night.